Good morning and welcome to the Quarter 3 report of NLM Labs. The outline for today's talk is as follows. I will first present a brief introduction of MESH along with our study goals, and then I will present results from our two task types. One of them is article set comparison, and the second is relevance judgments on query article pairs. So MESH is NLM's curated medical vocabulary. Every Medline article is indexed with one or multiple MESH terms. This vocabulary is used for query expansion to improve recall and retrieval in PubMed. The goal of the study is to evaluate the impact of MESH indexing. So we compare results from two search engines. The MESH engine uses both MESH expansion as well as MESH indexing, whereas the NoMesh engine only uses MESH expansion. In AIM-1, we presented results of log analysis to study the impact of MESH indexing on clicked articles. In AIM-2, we will focus on user judgments on results between MESH and NoMesh. We conducted two pilot studies during October 2019 to refine our system. Our final data collection took place from November 4th to December 30th. We had 234 users within NIH participate and 192 queries evaluated. Our dataset for this experiment consisted of frequency and click data from October 2018. These were then intersected with the one-day public queries from 2007 to give us 300,000 queries. These were further constrained to remove user-defined tags, known item queries, as well as queries without clicks. We also did some data cleaning to remove lowercase queries, duplicates, historical queries, and zero-hit queries. So this gave us our pool of 76,000 queries, which is our base data set. From this, we further constrained it to only queries which had a difference in top 5 to make it easier for the user to judge. Here we present the distribution of our selected queries against the base data set of 76,000. The blue bars show the base set, whereas the orange show the selected ones. As you can see in the top graph, the base set have queries of up to 22 words. But when we constrain this to those with a difference in the top 5, we only get queries with a length of up to 8 words. On the other hand, for retrieval size, we're able to cover all of the bins. We next present some demographics of our 234 participants. Most of our participants ranged from age 30 to 60, and most had a PhD. In terms of research area, we have a high representation from computational biology, neuroscience, and immunology. We now move on to the results of our first task type, which is the article set comparison. This task asks the user to compare two result sets, each containing 5 articles, one containing the top 5 from NoMesh, the other from MESH. The user is unaware of which result set corresponds to which case, or of what is being compared. They're asked to present their judgment on a Likert scale ranging from strongly prefer A to strongly prefer B. This is then interpreted as a numerical score where if MESH was preferred, then it has a score of 1, whereas if NoMesh is preferred, it has a score of 5. We received 823 valid responses, which corresponded to judging 192 queries. If we average the score across all users across all result sets, we get an average score of 2.97, which corresponds to neutral, If we further weight the user's score based on their confidence, which the user can provide their confidence on a scale of 1 to 3, where 1 is not confident and 3 is very confident, then the weighted score is 2.95, which is not all that different. Here we present the distribution of the scores and confidence of all users on all queries. So as we can see from the first graph, the mode of this is 3, which corresponds to neutral, whereas for confidence, the mode is 2. We next analyze results by query. So for each query, we want to categorize it as MESH, neutral, or no MESH based on the majority vote. So a score of 1 or 2 is a vote for MESH, a score of 3 is a vote for neutral, a score of 4 or 5 is a vote for no MESH. In case there is no majority, we assign the query a score of no consensus. And each query has between 2 to 5 user evaluations. Queries with 1 user judgment are removed. So the results of this are as follows. We have 49 queries with no consensus. So this would mean, let's say 2 users voted mesh, 2 voted no mesh, and 1 voted neutral. So it can't be categorized as any of those. We have 41 queries with a vote of mesh, 62 with a vote of neutral, and this is the highest, and 40 with a vote for no mesh. We next try to draw correlations between query length and retrieval size with the user judgments. In these graphs, gray presents queries which had no consensus, green presents those where mesh was preferred, blue presents queries with a neutral judgment, and pink presents queries with no mesh preferred. As we can see in both graphs, for all bins we have all 4 colors, so we cannot draw conclusions based on these attributes. We next looked at edge cases, so those queries where either all users voted for mesh or all users voted for no mesh. And if we look at the cases where mesh was preferred, we can see that the mesh expansion perfectly captures the query meaning. Whereas if we look at those cases where no mesh was preferred, we have some queries such as pedaling rate, which was translated to foot, which is not an exact or very accurate expansion. We now move on to results of the query article analysis. For this task, users are presented with a query followed by an article or its abstract and asked to provide their judgment on a Likert scale, which ranges from not relevant to relevant and contains 4 categories. Not relevant is scored as 1, whereas relevant is scored as 4. We received 714 valid responses, which corresponded to 17 queries. And this is again because each query has 10 tasks, 5 from mesh and 5 from no mesh. If we average the scores for all users, for all queries for the mesh articles, we get a score of 3.9, 3.09, and we get 3.15 for no mesh. So it's slightly higher for no mesh. And again, if we weighted by the user's confidence, then we get 3.14 for mesh and 3.19 for no mesh. And this is the distribution of the relevance score and the user confidence. So most query article pairs had a score of 4, and this again is because if we're looking at the top 5, regardless of mesh or no mesh, the articles are highly likely to be relevant. And the user confidence for these tasks is 3, so it's higher than the previous task where most users had a confidence of 2. We now analyze query article pairs by rank. So for each query article, the scores of all users were averaged to give it the final relevant score. And then at each rank, we compare the scores between the mesh article and the no mesh article. So for example, for the query integrin beta 6, where we can see that the scores at each rank, we can see that at rank 1, mesh and no mesh both scored 3, so the result for rank 1 is no difference. But for rank 2, we have mesh scoring at 2 and no mesh scoring at 3, so the result is no mesh. So for each rank then, we looked at all 17 queries, and we see the number of queries where mesh was preferred, no mesh was preferred, or there was no difference. So at rank 1, only 2 queries had mesh being preferred, or mesh scoring higher, 6 where no mesh scored higher, and 9 where both mesh and no mesh did not have a difference. So for the first rank, it is most likely that the article is highly relevant in both cases, so there was no difference. And then, so if we look at the consensus across the cases, for the top 3 ranks, there is no difference because they're very likely to be highly relevant and have a score of 4. Whereas if we go to lower, we can see that we have 7 articles where mesh was preferred, 4 where no mesh was preferred, and 6 with no difference. So mesh in this case had the highest. But overall, out of this 85 tasks, 36 had no difference. We also evaluated results by query. So for each query, we calculated the discounted cumulative gain for mesh and no mesh. And what the DCG does is it weights the relevant score by the inverse log of the position. So highly relevant scores which are ranked lower are penalized. So for each query, we then compare the DCG for mesh and no mesh. And for 7 queries, mesh had a higher DCG, whereas for 9, no mesh had a higher DCG. So these are the 7 queries where mesh was preferred, and again we can see that the mesh expansion captures the query well, whereas these are the 9 queries where no mesh was preferred, or no mesh had a higher DCG. Finally, we compare the results of the query article task against the article set comparison task. So the rows show the query article task results, whereas the columns show the article set results. So, for example, there were 2 queries where mesh was preferred in both the query article as well as the article set, and 1 query where mesh was preferred in the query article task, but no mesh was preferred in the 5x5 comparison. So the diagonal shows queries where both tasks agreed, and we can see that they're more or less consistent. In the future, we would like to incorporate user trustworthiness based on how they performed on sanity check tasks to further rank the users' results. And we also would like to look at queries which required extra time to evaluate or were skipped.